Okay, so when you picture a job in ancient Rome, what pops into your head? A legionary in shining armor? A powerful senator in the forum? Maybe even a gladiator, right? Well, what if I told you that the best jobs, the safest, smartest careers in the entire Roman world had absolutely nothing to do with glory and everything to do with staying completely invisible? We're going to dive into the jobs that really kept you alive. You know, we tend to see Roman life through a Hollywood lens, right? It's all about the soldier, the politician, the warrior in the arena, these jobs built on public fame. But the reality? It was so different. The people who were really winning were the food tasters, the tax collectors, and, yep, even the orgy planners. See, their careers weren't built on fame. They were built on something way more valuable: survival.
And this quote just hits the nail on the head. The real path to a long, happy life wasn't out on the battlefield or in the middle of the Senate. Nope, it was behind the scenes, in the places no one was really looking. Sounds kind of wild, I know, but for ancient Rome, this was the absolute truth.
So let's just bust this myth wide open. Why were these so-called dream jobs actually a one-way ticket to an early grave? It all came down to one simple, deadly thing: visibility. Being a famous soldier, a big-shot senator, or a champion gladiator meant everybody, and I mean everybody, knew your name. And in the cutthroat world of Rome, that just painted a giant target on your back. Every rival, every ambitious upstart, every angry mob, they all knew who you were and exactly where to find you. Glory was really just another word for being exposed.
Okay, so if being famous gets you killed, what's the move? Well, it meant you had to look at a career in a totally new way. It all boiled down to one single core strategy for survival.
And here it is: indoor safety versus outdoor death. It's such a simple idea, but it's incredibly profound. The outdoors, the battlefields, the public forums, the Colosseum, that's where you died. But the indoors, the palaces, the back offices, the private parties, that's where you lived. The truly smart Romans chose their careers based on this one single life-or-death difference.
All right, let's put this theory to the test. Our first case file: the emperor's food taster. Now that sounds like pretty much the most dangerous job on the planet, right?
Yeah, the myth is this heroic servant, bravely taking the first bite of every single meal, ready to drop dead at any moment to save the emperor. It's great for a movie, but it's just not how it worked.
The reality was that the job had very little to do with actually finding poison. It was all about psychology. It was about symbolic reassurance. Just having a taster there was usually enough to scare off anyone thinking about poisoning the food. It was a stable, indoor job that was much more about security theater than it was about daily, life-threatening risk.
Okay, so let's go from the emperor's dining room to the public bathroom? Yeah, our second case file is the Urine Tax Collector. And I know that sounds just awful.
You're probably thinking this was a job for the absolute bottom of the barrel, right? Some poor guy who was constantly getting made fun of for dealing with, but that's just the myth. The reality was this job held a ton of quiet, unglamorous power. See, urine was actually a super important industrial chemical back then. They used it for tanning leather, for laundry. It was a big deal. So taxing its collection was big business. It helped fund the entire empire. And that leads to a really important rule about how Rome worked.
And that is the bottom line. This wasn't a joke. It was a serious, essential job for the state. You did not mock the guy in charge of a major source of income for the emperor. You got on his good side. It was a safe, quiet, and surprisingly powerful career.
And for our final case file, we've got the most scandalous-sounding job of all: the orgy planner. But like the title says, this was way more about paperwork than it was about partying.
Of course, the myth is just a life of total hedonism, right? We picture this person right in the middle of the wildest parties in history, just living it up with the Roman elite. But the reality was all business. This person was basically a high-stakes event manager for the most powerful and most dangerous people in Rome. Can you imagine managing a guest list full of political rivals, dealing with the massive egos of senators, and being responsible for protecting everyone's reputation with total discretion? One mistake and you're dead. This person wasn't a participant. They were the invisible administrator with the clipboard whose entire survival depended on making sure everything went off without a hitch. So, what do all three of these jobs, the food taster, the tax collector, the orgy planner, what do they all have in common?
They all tapped into the secret wisdom of a truly successful Roman career.
It all boils down to this. The ultimate goal in Rome wasn't getting rich or famous. It was being anonymous. The best job you could have was one where you were essential, but nobody even noticed you were there. Because if nobody noticed you, then nobody had a reason to want you gone. Invisibility wasn't a weakness. It was the ultimate form of job security.
And that really leaves us with a question for today, doesn't it? In our world that's so obsessed with followers and likes and building a personal brand, have we forgotten that ancient wisdom? Is there still a quiet, incredible power in just being essential but invisible?